as we jump right into things, James Franklin, the hot name that we touched on in last show, but has become obviously even more prevalent over the coming days. It's Virginia Tech sort of circled him as a top target, and they've went in. Now, you've heard smoke around different guys, and I'll be the first to come to the table and hand up. Shane Beamer was having the talk of the town like a week ago, and are you really getting pulled by different agents, or is that just how things go? Like initially, even like I was talking, didn't look like James Franklin was going to be a viable option, just with the frameworks of everything. Brent Pry going out, obviously their relationship, what other available options and suitors, and what you were hearing even from recruits, different people close in that camp on what was going to be available. It just didn't look like Virginia Tech was going to shape up. But as you take a step back, and I think importantly, as the committee took a step back, looked at different options and sort of went through their autonomous review, I guess you could say, as Doug dropped the FOIA earlier. A lot of the signs point to it. The attractive location for James Franklin. There are some other things. Like I think the familial connection, if his hearing things about wanting some family to finish school up the road, being close to that. Where else are you getting looks, which I think is really important in the process. And things could change, obviously. But obviously in the Mid-Atlantic region where he spent most of his professional career up at Penn State, even to Vanderbilt, it's a region he knows well. The Virginia DMV down in North Carolina. I think that is really big. Obviously having that and all those positives for the job. As I see in the chat, people talking about the fake account. Yeah, and through this, make sure to stay very, very locked in on where you're receiving your information. A lot of people out there posting things, and a lot of it is speculation. And like I said, there's going to be a mix, but just make sure if you click on an account, there's like 200 followers because a lot of stuff's going to be coming out here. I think it's really important to know some of those hangups or different things that you're going to be looking at as a James Franklin type. When you look at Virginia Tech, you can talk about all the positives, the budget inflow, the athletic department restructuring that I think we'll get into a little bit. But I think first off, are you going to have your NIL in place? I think that's going to be one of the biggest things that James Franklin is going to look for when he takes a job. You can have all these things guaranteed, but making sure that you have the NIL alignment in this era is going to be very, very paramount for someone of his stature. And that's something he's going to know because this isn't a head coach that's coming out of coaching like a Jimbo or someone who hasn't been in the game there for a little bit. Like he knows how it operates. He was just operating at a really high clip, obviously played in the national semifinal a year ago. So this is someone who's very, very well equipped to operate in that world. And honestly, what they do up there with Villagrana and all those guys at the Blue White Collective or whatever is kind of even pushing the game. So that's a very positive for whoever brings in Franklin, just for his knowledge in that aspect. I think other things to watch is obviously his agent is Jimmy Sexton. I think this is the most important thing as we get into some of these comments and just throughout the show. There's real smoke behind this. It's not like you can't even call it smoke. There's obviously a lot behind this. And the ball, I think essentially the ball is in James Franklin's court. And now it's like, yeah, it's very easy to say if James Franklin wants to be the coach at Virginia Tech, yeah, he can go be the coach at Virginia Tech. There's a lot more layers to that. As Jimmy Sexton, he's a client of his, obviously very notorious, very successful college football agent that controls a lot of the dominoes. A lot of the very prominent college football coaches are repped by Jimmy Sexton, and he knows he's been in this game a really long time. And it's a pretty simple game of leverage and being able to find the best suitors for all your clients. And right now it's October 29th. And I know people want this imminent. And, once things start to trickle out, even this early, it almost seems like it should be done imminently. But it is of the best for Jimmy Sexton and his client to hold out as long as they can and allow other options to open. Now, Franklin essentially could ideally, or however he shakes out, if that is the way it goes, if he does want to take the job, sort of put the foot down and lay it out like, hey, this is what we want. But Sexton obviously is going to want to utilize all the time and see what happens on the football field and what other options open, how different things shake out, because you can always sort of leverage against that and say, well, for example, obviously the Arkansas job is open. They offered this. Will you match? And I think that's really big because the ball is definitely in their court right now. And Virginia Tech obviously has what they've sent over and taking some time to review it over there, obviously with the agency. And there's a lot of really positive momentum there. It's just the timing of it. Is it going to happen? If it's going to happen, I think it's going to happen within the next week or mid next week or somewhere in that time frame. And once you get past that, I think you're dealing with people on the committee, and especially Ryan McCarthy, Jay Pearson, and then Rakovich, the rector, but especially Ryan and Pearson, some of those people, I think they've been pretty open with Sexton that they're not willing to play those games. And you're not going to overspend or leak out some money that you're not willing to go over for. And the timeline, if you do want to sign a coach who's not coaching right now and have them jump into the fold early, I know there's already people talking about, well, you look at that Miami weekend of the 22nd for recruiting purposes. It could be really, really big. If you do want to go that route and get someone in there early, they're not going to wait for you to try and leverage and squeeze and put them in a tough spot to wait till November 8th, November 15th, or even later, if that's the way they want to go. So you've got a lot of really savvy people in the room with their hands on the wheel, obviously keeping good track of that. But I think that is the biggest thing, that the ball is definitely in James Franklin court. I think there's real smoke behind it. I think it's very obvious that the committee is weighing that, as well as obviously Jimmy Sexton and wanting to leverage off of that. And when it first initially happens, like I said, Shane Beamer a lot, and there was real action behind that as well. Like, people are like, oh, that just came out of nowhere. But I mean, there was definitely a lot of real noise about that as well. Things have definitely shifted towards Franklin, but deal is definitely not done. I know a lot of people still think it's done. So, I mean, they're working through that. And it's really just in the court of Jimmy Sexton and James Franklin to get that across the finish line. And if it were to happen, I'm under the assumption, sounding like if it's going to happen, it's going to happen in the next week. And if it's any later, I think they're going to pivot off and have to look at some of those other targets. I'm sure we'll get into that later in the show. But obviously they have circled in, touched on, locked in on their top target, James Franklin. And first off, we touched on it a lot in the last show, so I won't say too much, but James Franklin instantly obviously raises the floor, ceiling, whatever at Virginia Tech from where they've been. This is someone that's done at a really high level. I know all that is about the AP Top 25 record, I believe, 4-25 or whatever against AP Top 25 teams. This is someone competing in the ACC, has a clear path to the college football playoff, and just a great job on the recruiting trail. Someone who has a lot of support, hearing from different recruits, even current players, who wherever he lands up are willing to follow him. I think that's going to be really big. The next biggest thing with Franklin that I think we'll touch on, and it's sort of putting whatever chicken before the eggs or however that works, is the staffing. And I think that's going to be really big. The next question, if this were to go through, like I said, a lot of this is obviously still up in the air. No decision has been made, but you can make the big hire. And I know James Franklin is obviously going to draw his name alone, massive influx of donation, a lot of hype around it just based on his name, and rightfully so. But you can have the best A-list hire. You have to back it up with a great staff, not only on the field coaching, but also support staff. I think it'll be really interesting to see how he fills out his staff. I mean, especially on the field, but also on the back end. And I think that'll be really interesting to see. But his top target, if it's going to happen, I think it's going to be sooner than later. On the back end side, obviously, his agent is dealing with the committees, specifically Ryan McCarthy, sounds like, Pearson, obviously Whit Babcock, as we touched on in the show, not involved in this process. I know there's different things going out there. Feel very confidently in our reporting that Whit Babcock is not involved. And once an announcement like this gets made, you feel pretty confident there's going to be another announcement made on the back end of some athletic movement. There's been speculation on the board sort of tied in with that. And this is sort of more loose reporting of just some things that we're hearing. Fielding a lot of phone calls and texts, even as we're on live here throughout the day, hearing that they might be hosting different administrative types for different interviews. Like I said, I don't think you're going to see, I know people saying they saw James Franklin or he was on a plane today. A lot of planes coming through today, not marked down on any flight logs or anything, but just being in the area and looking up and seeing a lot of decent sized jets flying through, and then hearing smoke from different people that they might be hosting different administrative types for potential roles or however that works from different institutions. So I think that could be something else to watch as they're sort of working through this process. Now, that's a lot more speculative than what we're hearing with James Franklin, but something to watch as well. As once you get the head coach in place, we've heard about all the restructuring on the athletic side, obviously with Whit not being involved with this. I think that's really big to note, as there's some conflicting reports out there, but just make sure they're in on that. But an attractive location, obviously somewhere he knows well, somewhere he can pick the brain of Brent Pry, obviously, on him. Like, that's someone you're going to consult in that process. And I think the biggest thing is make sure you have your NIL in place, because that's going to be a massive stipulation in getting it. But yeah, and it's just seeing what other jobs open and how dominoes can unfold, because that's sort of the reason for wanting to get someone in the boat this early. I mean, it's not even November yet, and you're talking about wanting a head coach signed. So that's going to be really big, just to see how those things unfold down the stretch. And things could definitely change, as they always change. You're on Beamer and you're hearing some different noise. But as of right now, I can say pretty confidently they've zeroed in on James Franklin. Wouldn't expect anything super imminent, but it would be sooner. And I know when you say sooner, it's like, okay, in an hour? No, probably over the next week if it were to happen. Or it sounds like they're going to shift and pivot off and not be able to be waited on or held hostage, waiting for just to vet other offers and see what comes open. That they're going to try and move on with their search as proceeded. So the ball's in their court. I think that touches on that pretty well and some of the other details surrounding James Franklin.